The death of Tiberius Gracchus in 133 BC marks the beginning of a period of crisis in the late Republic, a period that will see a series of outright civil wars. And the fact that Tiberius was killed, that his career ended in an act of violence, somehow almost opened new possibilities for the use of brute force instead of the rule of law to settle political accounts. The assassination of Tiberius also saw the beginnings of a new factionalism in Roman society, in Roman politics. The rise of two factions. One, the optimates, the elites, the best people, those who represented the interests of the Senate, those who represented the aristocratic element in Roman society, and who wished to see the society, the republic, dominated by the authority of the Senate. Those who believed that differences in wealth, especially differences in the distribution of land, were just, were part of the order of society in which some deserved more than others. A second faction, the populares, the populist faction, those who favored the power of the army, the power of the common man, the power of the assemblies, the democratic elements in the Roman constitution, and those who believed that the distribution of land, that the distribution of wealth was so unequal that it was in fact unjust, and that the Roman state might in various ways take actions to equalize the distribution of property and to harmonize society. We'll look at the crisis of the late Republic, especially through the eyes of one towering intellectual figure, Cicero. Cicero, who lives from 106 BC, who grows up against the backdrop of this age of crisis, and who becomes one of the central political figures in the late Republic until his death in 43 BC, when he's assassinated by the henchmen of Mark Antony, one of the lieutenants of Caesar, of Julius Caesar, who was vying for control of the Roman state and who resented the opposition of Cicero, the stubborn and open opposition to the power of Mark Antony and his colleagues. So Cicero is a man of politics, but he's also a man of intellect. He's a philosophical figure. And in fact, few are so responsible as Cicero for integrating Greek philosophy, Greek thought, and the tradition of Greek political thought into not just the Roman world, but specifically into the Latin language. Cicero inherits the tradition of Plato and above all Aristotle. And Cicero's political thought is often considered eclectic and derivative. That is, that it's eclectic, it's formed of different sources and is in some ways perhaps inconsistent, and derivative. That is, that Cicero's political thought is simply a translation derived from the Greek originals like Aristotle. And it's true that Cicero doesn't stand as one of the most innovative political thinkers in the history of the ancient world. But it's easy to underestimate the significance of Cicero, even the originality of Cicero as a political synthesizer, as someone who synthesizes the various strands of constitutional thought that come out of Aristotle, of natural law and natural justice that derive at least in part from the philosophy of Stoicism that we'll consider. And Cicero harmonizes these in a way that have direct application to the politics of the late Republic. Cicero is a moderate conservative. That is, Cicero is someone who favors the traditions and the powers, especially of the Senate, but in a moderate way, and resents the deep discord that has infected Roman society. Cicero is a conservative who seeks a politics of consensus, a politics of concord, and in fact, his rise to power is based upon his advocacy of concordia, of political concord, of a kind that would restore the Republic to its balance and its glory. We'll see Cicero, who is one of the greatest Latin authors simply in terms of his command of the language, and who has always been the gold standard for Latin prose, so that to learn Latin is, and always has been in some sense, to learn to read Cicero. We'll see Cicero as a political figure and as a philosophical figure. And so we'll see Cicero, whose extensive surviving writings, his letters and his political tracts, make him one of the best known figures in the history of political thought, certainly in the ancient world. He's someone whose career, whose thoughts, whose family life we know in some ways intimately. And he's left behind a record of his letters, of his legal cases, and of his political thoughts. Above all, in three fundamental works: his book, The Republic, his book, The Laws, and his book, which has important political content, called On Duties, De Officiis, a book whose importance would be hard to overestimate historically, a book that was read across the Middle Ages and throughout the early modern period, even across the Enlightenment, one of the most printed and one of the most widely read books after the Bible in all of human history. And so we'll look at the ideas that are in these books as an expression of Roman Republicanism. Cicero is one of the most important theorists of Roman Republicanism, and he does so in a way that synthesizes Greek philosophy, translates it into the concrete terms of Roman institutions, and does so in a way that was highly politically relevant within the context of the late Republic.